Mona Lisa Foster says the jury in the Kyle murder case has been seated 10 women, 2 men. How do you think the makeup of this jury will influence the outcome? One of the great tragedies of American Sniper, of course, is that Chris Kyle was killed back in February, I think, of 2013. After the movie was over, I saw it in Sherman Oaks at the Art Like Theater. And of the many, 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 many brilliant, brilliant, brilliant things that Clint Eastwood did in that movie, I don't know if this was... Oh, if you're maybe as aware of this as I was blown away by what Clint Eastwood did at the end of that movie. Clint Eastwood has a closing scene where they're showing a video of the parades for the actual Chris Kyle and all the veterans lining the road and the American flags and stuff. And then he does a credit crawl, and a credit crawl for a modern movie is a 12-minute experience. It's not, it's an army of people to make a movie these days. And Clint Eastwood was looking for music that would make that credit crawl somber and really hit people emotionally. And Clint Eastwood did one of the most brilliant and one of the most daring things I've ever seen, believe it or not, folks, because Clint Eastwood did the credit crawl in silence. There's no music playing, none. And that credit crawl of silence is a masterstroke of storytelling, because basically when I was in the theater and they went to the credit crawl and it was silence, you did not have permission to leave the theater. Really. Nobody got up. Who's going to get up in the middle of this silence? What he did by making that credit crawl silent is he made it a funeral. He made the movie, the ending of the movie, a funeral that you were attending, and you had to have the same level of silence and respect that a funeral entails. And I think that's an incredibly brilliant move. So I just had to get that said. But he was murdered in February of 2013, also almost 2 years ago now. However, the reason I got that up there is to say that, at least in the theater I saw it in, I think it might have been unique to ArcLight. After the funeral credit crawl was over, there was a little featurette. And it was an interview from an ArcLight guy who seemed awfully metrosexual after watching that movie, with the screenwriter. And the screenwriter was a pretty tough guy looking kind of guy. I think he said he played football. It wasn't what you would, imagine as a Hollywood screenwriter. And they asked the screenwriter about working with Chris Kyle, and he said that basically the screenwriter had submitted the script to Kyle, and Kyle had said, it seems really good, and given him a joke, and Kyle had written back an LOL and was killed the next day. And that the original drafts of the script didn't have anything of his response with his wife, and that so much of the movie became him then talking to his wife to try to get to the heart of who Chris Kyle was. And that movie, if the movie had just been about Chris Kyle's experiences in Vietnam without his domestic life, that would have been so much worse. So much worse. Because the thing that the romance with his wife brought to the movie was it brought home the cost. Not just the cost to his wife, which was enormous, but the cost to Kyle, the cost to him, what he paid, what price he paid in order to do what he did. So imagining the movie without that, it would have just been a war movie. Still would have been amazing, but it was his humanity that made him so remarkable, and it's his humanity that made the film what it is. And without his relationship with his wife, without his soft side, you don't get to see any of that. And so it was an infinitely better film because of that. And then, the fact that the first draft of the script, which he approved, doesn't have him dying in the end, he said the first draft didn't include any of his work with the veterans because they didn't know anything about his work with the veterans. He was murdered by, I think, a Marine on a shooting range. And, that wasn't in the original draft either because he was alive during the original draft. So that made the movie better. I only say that just to get to this question about the murder case. 10 women, 2 men. Mona Lisa, there's a suggestion there. I'm not saying you put it there, but there's a suggestion. Oh, I guess you did put it there. that maybe women won't be able to make a judgment on this. And I don't know if that's true at all. This is one of those things where, sometimes strange experiences, personal experience, will open your eyes to genuine preconceptions. I was a jury foreman about 2 years ago. It was a very minor thing. Policemen rolled up on this scene. There were 8 or 9 males. They put the men up against the wall to cuff them, just to secure them long enough so they could ask a couple questions. It was literally like making too much noise at night kind of thing. It was a loud party kind of thing. So they put these guys up against the wall just to kind of secure the situation. And this young Hispanic woman came out and started assaulting the cops. That was the entire case. And the defense attorney, sometimes, I'll tell you what, I don't know if it's a public defender or what, but this defense attorney was so incompetent, either that or the quality of the jurors is so low, that the defense attorney's defense for his client, this woman, was, yes, she was, but how could a woman who's 5'1" pull effectively interfere with the work of a policeman? Yes, she was pulling his arm, but she's 5'1" and the policeman's 6'3". I mean, how can you expect a woman that small to impact the work that a policeman is doing? And the second I heard him say that, I just thought, well, then your defense attorney has just admitted that this woman committed the crimes that she's been accused of. She was charged with interfering with policemen in the line of duty. And we got to the jury room, and there was virtually no one wanted to convict. And it was like, what do you mean you're not wanting? What are you talking about? Oh, there's probably more. The police are lying. What makes you think they're lying? Well, the police always lie. Well, where's the evidence that there's lying? No one came and said that this didn't happen. They didn't provide any other testimony. We have to go with the testimony that's in the room here. Make a long story short, the only 2 people that were convinced that this woman had in fact committed this crime were me and a middle-aged black woman from South Central. And we stuck around until we got a conviction on one. One of the other police officers had some internal contradictions on his testimony, and so basically we took a day and a half, and we found her guilty of one charge with the one officer, and they couldn't get to getting her guilty on the second charge because the second officer's testimony was considerably dicier. But I never forgot that moment. It's like you just have assumptions. You assume that a middle-aged black woman from South Central is going to have a real problem with the police, but it turns out that's not the case at all. That was a case of genuine, prejudice, I would say, on my part, or at least assumptions. I wasn't assuming she was going to, certainly didn't assume she was a lawbreaker, criminal in any way, but, you come in thinking she's probably not going to have a whole lot of respect or admiration for the police, and it was the 2 of us basically turned the rest of the jury just through persuasion, just through saying, what is the crime? Read us the statute. The defense attorney admitted that her client was on there. That's all we have to do. So I don't worry too much about it. I don't think it's a question of male or female. I mean, it's a question of evidence, and it's pretty compelling evidence. And I think the guy that did it is in a bit of a fair amount of trouble. So no, I don't have any problem with 10 women, 2 men. And if I did, then we would have to rethink this entire society. But it seems to be working out by and large pretty well.